They trapped the truth in a time loop, so I stole the evidence before it could reset.
Minutes ago, Leora cut the tether and found the timeshare jumping toward Cal's hull lock through a hidden bureau handshake. She flipped the safety cover and wrapped her glove around the manual vent handle, knowing Mara's voice might not survive what came next. Harrowgate's airlock corridor was a narrow throat of metal and warning stripes. The viewport showed Skiff 9 hanging outside like a patient star, and the distortion in the light crawled toward it with calm intent. Leora's objective was to break every external connection at once and force the sheer field to die with the station. If she failed, Cal would become the new anchor, and the Bureau would own an endless reset they could deploy wherever truth got inconvenient. Cal's breathing filled her comms, controlled and stubborn. "On your pull, I burn away hard." "I heard you," Leora said. She kept her voice level for TTS and for herself. "When the air goes, you leave." Mara's presence pressed close in Leora's helmet, warm and steady in a way that made Leora's chest hurt. "The break will give me one path. I can fold the shear back into Harrowgate's frame and seal it. It will take my last coherent strand." Leora swallowed and forced her hands not to shake. "Then I carry your testimony." "You carry more than that," Mara said. "You carry the fact that you chose." The Bureau carrier tone returned, thin but confident, like a man reciting a contract while a building burns. "Containment remains authorized. Marshal Sen will comply under provisional audit." Leora did not answer. She pulled the vent handle all the way down. The corridor screamed as pressure dumped. A white fog of crystallizing moisture flashed across the deck, and the world became a violent pull toward the breach. Leora locked her boots to the deck magnets and hooked her left arm through a recessed handhold she had noticed on the way in, a small act of preparation that now decided whether she lived. The sheer distortion reacted like something startled. It surged toward the easiest anchor, then splintered in the sudden vacuum, its edges tearing into threads that reached for Skiff 9 and found nothing solid to grab. Cal's ship kicked its thrusters. Through the viewport, Skiff 9 lurched away in a clean, hard burn, and the distortion chased it for half a heartbeat before the broken channel snapped shut. Leora's suit alarms wailed in her ears. Her boots strained. Her shoulders screamed as the handhold bit into her arm. The verdict core pouch on her chest thumped against the metal, a warm weight trying to be flung into open space. Mara spoke one last time, not loud, not dramatic, just present. "I am here." Then her tone shifted, thinner like a signal losing power. "I will close it now." Leora forced air through her lungs, against the suit's emergency feed. "I will remember you, Mara." A soft exhale came through the comm, almost like relief. "That is enough." The distortion folded inward, away from the viewport, away from Cal, away from any future it could infect. The airlock corridor's lights steadied for the first time since Leora arrived. The station's constant indecision stopped, as if time had finally been told no. Leora slammed the interior seal and triggered repressurization. The corridor filled with air in a harsh rush. Her suit stopped screaming and shifted to warnings that sounded almost polite. Her arm went numb, then returned in sharp pins. She stood slowly, testing her boots, then her balance, then her will. The comm line crackled. Cal's voice came back, ragged with thrust and adrenaline. "I am clear. The distortion is gone. Say something so I know you're still inside your own life." Leora exhaled once long. "I am still here." There was a pause, then Cal let out a breath that carried more than relief. "Good, because I'm not dragging a ghost home." She moved through the station with practiced urgency, but the micro-resets were gone now. Harrowgate felt old and wounded, not predatory. She reached the original airlock and cycled through, using manual controls in case the Bureau had left any other invisible hooks behind. When she stepped back onto Skiff 9, Cal was waiting at the inner hatch, helmet off, face drawn with that stubborn calm that only came after fear had done its worst. He did not touch her at first. He simply looked at her like he was verifying she existed. Leora removed her helmet. Cold air hit her skin. The The cutter's cabin smelled like worn insulation and human coffee, and for a moment that ordinary smell hit her harder than vacuum. Cal held out his gloved hand not to pull her, just to offer contact. Leora took it. His grip was firm, steady, and wordless. It was not romance in the storybook sense. It was something older and more useful. "You broke your badge," Cal said. "I broke my leash," Leora replied. She unsealed the pouch and placed the verdict core on the small worktable between them. The cylinder was still warm, but the warmth felt different now, like residual heat rather than a pulse. Leora tapped the activation pad. A plain data header appeared on the table display, along with a short line of text in bureau format. Arbitration log, authorized failure. Witness status, contained. No audio, no voice, no Mara. Leora stared at the words until they blurred, then sharpened again. Emotional closure arrived in a hard, clean shape. She had not saved Mara's life as a person in the room with her. She had saved Mara's truth from being erased, and that truth now sat between her and a government that would call her contaminated for touching it. Cal watched her, careful and quiet. What now? Leora did not answer with a plan, because a plan would pretend she had options. She answered with a vow, because vows were what you made when the world narrowed. "I will deliver this to an authority they cannot silence," Leora said. "I will make them look at what they did, even if it burns my career down to the studs." The cutter's console chimed. A message arrived on a tight beam channel, high security, bureau encryption. Cal's eyes flicked to it, then back to her, as if he already knew what it would say. Leora opened it. The text was brief, clinical, and worse than a threat because it assumed compliance. Provisional audit active. Marshal Sen to report 4 debrief AT coordinates provided. Failure to comply will trigger treaty sanctions against outer colonies. They were not just coming for her. They were putting a gun to 1,000 innocent throats and calling it law. Leora closed the message and looked at the verdict core again. It held proof. It also held a countdown disguised as bureaucracy. Cal's voice dropped, careful. "They're using people you've never met to force your hand." Leora nodded once. Her fear had a name now, and that made it manageable. She reached out and covered the core with her palm, as if she could keep it from poisoning the air. In the silence that followed, Leora felt something else, faint and impossible, like a pressure change inside the cylinder. Not a voice, not words, just a tiny shift, as if a strand of Mara had latched onto the truth she had saved and refused to fully die. Leora lifted her eyes to Cal, and then to the dark beyond the cutter's small window, where the frontier waited and the bureau followed, and the treaty hung by a thread she was no longer willing to hold alone. If revealing the bureau's crime could save Mara's truth, but doom innocent colonies to sanctions, what should Leora do? If she cut the tether wrong, Cal would wake up in the same second forever and never know why. A few minutes ago, Marshal Leora Centaur offered bureau badge to stop a remote anchor, then found the timeshare field gripping skiff 9 through the tether. She is in Harrow Gate's airlock corridor with the verdict core on her chest and Mara's voice in her ear. They are inside the outpost above the gas giant, with the airlock viewport showing Cal's cutter outside like a lantern in deep water. Leora's objective is to sever the tether coupling without letting the sheer field jump onto Cal's ship. If she fails, both vessels will be trapped in a repeating loop, and the treaty will collapse while the Bureau calls it a clean accident. Her suit clock read 07:22, then slid to 0. 07:24, then snapped back to 0. 07:23, as if time could not commit. Cal's voice stayed steady, but the edges were tight. "On your mark, I can burn away, but the tether is vibrating like it's alive. It is acting like a line under tension," Leora said. "Hold thrust until I say." Mara whispered, close and controlled. "They are not just reaching, they are latching." Leora set her cutter against the first emergency bolt on the tether coupling housing. The bolt was thick, plated, designed to survive panic. Her cutter could beat metal, but it could not beat indecision, so she chose a clean cut and committed to it. The cutter hissed. The bolt glowed. The tether ripple thickened, then paused as if the field had noticed her hand. The bureau carrier tone returned, muted now that her badge was gone but still present like a headache. Marshal Sen, you will maintain station integrity. Unauthorized severance will be prosecuted under treaty sabotage. Cal let out a short breath. They're threatening you while you're saving their ship. They are preserving their story, Leora said, not their people. The first bolt dropped free. She moved to the second. A micro-reset tugged at her wrist. For half a second her cutter tip lifted, then settled back into the same groove, forcing her to start the cut again. She gritted her teeth and drove forward, using pressure instead of finesse. Leora, Cal said, your heart rate is up. Talk to me. I'm fine, she replied. Mara's voice softened. You are not fine. You are choosing to be brave in a place designed to punish choice. Leora did not answer that. She did not like being seen that clearly. It made her feel exposed, and exposure was how you got used. She cut the second bolt. The coupling housing sagged a fraction. The ripple along the tether shivered like a hand tightening. Cal's voice went sharp. It pulled me. Not hard, but it pulled. Leora stared at the tether line through the viewport. The ripple had become a traveling knot, moving toward Skiff 9's hull connection point, not the station's. It was going to anchor on Cal, not on her. Mara spoke fast. If it anchors on his ship, I become leverage. They will offer to release him in exchange for my silence. Cal's tone turned flat. I don't bargain with parasites. You are not the one they will bargain with, Leora said. They will bargain with me. That landed heavy in the small corridor. She could feel the old pull toward procedure, toward surrendering the core and letting the Bureau clean it up. It would be easier. It would also be the end of Mara, and it would put Cal into a loop that would never show up on any ledger. Leora moved to the final bolt. She steadied her breathing until it matched the cutter's hiss. Cal, she said, when I say burn, you burn hard away. You do not look back. You can't order me anymore, Cal replied. I can ask, Leora said, please. There was a beat of silence, then Cal answered in a quieter voice. All right. On your word. The word please felt like a small crack in her armor, and she hated that it also felt like relief. Mara's voice dropped to something intimate, almost careful. You just changed him. I did not mean to, Leora said. You meant to trust, Mara replied. That is different. Leora cut into the final bolt. The housing flexed. The tether ripple surged toward the viewport like a wave. Her suit flashed another warning. Sheer contact imminent. The official Bureau voice returned, no longer threatening, now calmly satisfied. Containment confirmed. Arbitration witness reacquired upon ship anchor. Marshal Sen, stand by. Mara's breath hitched in Leora's ear. They already think they won. Leora's cutter bit through the last thread of metal. The bolt dropped. The coupling housing loosened and the tether line snapped free with a violent shudder. The ripple did not disappear. It leapt, not along the tether now, but through the open space of the viewport like a distortion in the light, sliding toward Skiff 9's hull port where Cal's ship linked with the station for comm and power handshake. The field did not need the tether. It needed a connection, any connection, and the Bureau had built more than one. Cal cursed once, then caught himself. It jumped. It's crawling toward my hull lock. Leora's mind went cold and clear. The tether cut was necessary, but not sufficient. The Bureau's handshake channel was a second anchor, and she had ignored it because it was invisible. She slapped the airlock control to isolate external links. The panel flashed red and refused. System override active. Mara spoke with a grim certainty. They preloaded the override. You cannot lock them out from there. Leora looked at the manual release handle behind the panel, a blunt lever with a safety cover. It would vent the corridor, hard, and sever every connection in one violent act. It would also throw her into open space if she mistimed it, and it would force Cal to burn away blind. Cal's voice steadied again, the way it did when fear had nowhere left to go. Leora, if you vent, you might not make it back in. If I do not vent, Leora said, you will not make it out. She touched the core pouch on her chest. Warm, steady, human, Mara spoke, almost tender now. If you vent, I can ride the brake and lock the loop back onto the station's dying frame, but it will cost me. Leora's throat tightened. Cost you how? Mara answered without drama. I will stop being a person who can speak to you. Cal's breathing came through the calm, slow and controlled. No, we don't spend her like that. Mara replied softly. You already did when you took the contract. I do not blame you. I am simply done being a tool. Leora stared at the manual handle. Her flaw begged for clean outcomes that did not exist. Her new trust told her the truth. Someone was going to pay, and only she could decide who. She placed her hand on the safety cover and spoke to Cal, voice steady, honest. When the air goes, you burn, even if you hear me fall. Cal's reply was quiet, furious, and loyal all at once. I hate this job. Leora flipped the safety cover up, felt the cold metal of the handle under her glove, and held Mara's silence like a promise she did not deserve. The moment she freed Mara, Harrow Gate stopped rewinding and started hunting the ship outside. Minutes ago, Marshal Leora Sen pulled the coupling lever in the reactor spine, keyed by the verdict core, while the Bureau tried to anchor to her through an incoming hail. She is still inside Harrow Gate, and she still has one job: get out with the evidence without letting the timeshare field escape. The equipment bay lights went from too steady to violently uncertain. The reactor casing gave a low groan, like metal remembering pain. Her suit clock unlocked and rolled forward, then jumped back 2 seconds, then forward again, as if it had lost faith in itself. Her objective was now two-part and equally ugly. Reach the airlock with Mara's core intact, and keep the shear field from latching onto Skiff 9 through Cal's tether. If she failed, the loop would spread, trapping both vessels in repeating time, and the Bureau would call it an accident while the treaty burned anyway. Cal's voice cut through static. Your signal just cleared, then got dirty again. You did something big. Leora steadied her breathing. The coupling is broken, but the field is still active. And that hail, Cal said, it's not just a call. It's a handshake. They're trying to take control of you like you're a drone. Mara's voice came softer, close to Leora's ear. They used your badge as the key. Your authority is how they enter. Leora's jaw tightened. Then I stopped being useful. A fresh tone chimed in her helmet, crisp and official, layered under the hail. Marshal Sen, confirm compliance. By treaty authority, relinquish the arbitration core and stand by for extraction. No name, no warmth. Just jurisdiction. Leora did not answer. She snapped the verdict core into a sealed pouch on her chest and shut the latch with a hard click. She drew her cutter and turned it in her palm until it felt like a decision. Mara, Leora said under her breath, you said you were a person. Tell me why they buried you. A pause, then Mara spoke with a steadiness that sounded practiced. I testified that the Bureau staged the failure. I logged the order. They could not erase it, so they looped it. Clean hands forever. Leora swallowed. You watched the same minutes repeat. Yes, Mara said, and I learned what men do when time stops costing them. The words should have made Leora angry. Instead, they made her clear. She pushed out of the equipment bay into the service corridor. The air felt thick, like she was moving through a memory that did not want to change. Every few steps, the lights tried to reset to their earlier flicker pattern, and each time the new pattern won by a fraction. Cal spoke again, lower. Leora, you need to tell me if I'm about to become a loop. You are not, she said, and realized she meant it as more than reassurance. I will not let that happen. The official voice returned, now sharper. Noncompliance logged. Marshal Sen, you are under provisional audit. Your actions will be reviewed for contamination. Mara gave a quiet sound that might have been laughter if it had not carried exhaustion. They are already writing your guilt for you. Leora turned at the next junction and stopped. The corridor ahead had 2 airlock signs, identical, both pointing forward. Her map displayed 2 identical routes again, overlapping like doubled ink. The fold is still here, Cal said. It's painting choices that aren't real. Mara whispered urgent. Do not follow the signs, follow the vibration. The old deck plates sing, the new plates lie. Leora crouched, pressed her glove to the floor and felt it. A faint, uneven tremor ran toward port, not straight ahead. Harrow Gate was old enough to speak through its bones if you listened. She took the port route, ignoring the glowing arrows. The lights did not like that. They strobed once, trying to reassert the previous corridor, and her boot slid backward a half step. She drove the cutter tip into the wall panel and held it there as an anchor point. The heated metal hissed and the microreset stopped tugging. She pulled herself forward and kept going. Smart, Cal said. You're giving time something it can't easily rewrite. I am giving it friction, Leora replied. They reached the ring access hatch. The hatch should have been sealed, but it stood open, as if someone had invited her to hurry. That was never a gift. It was a funnel. Leora slipped through and entered the central ring, where the outpost's main corridor curved like a throat. The floating mug was back, still undecided, still pretending this was normal. The bureau hail surged again. The official voice now carried a second layer, a harmonic undertone that made Leora's teeth ache. Marshal Sen, you will comply. You will bring the core to the airlock. You will reconnect the tether. Cal cursed softly. That undertone is a carrier. They're riding it. They can push commands into your suit. Mara spoke fast. They can also pull me. If they re-anchor, I am back in the cage. Leora moved, but her hands started to feel heavy, like someone was pressing down on her wrists from far away. Her suit icon flashed a warning. Remote authorization detected. It tried to open a channel on its own. Leora's flaw screamed for procedure. Accept the audit. Preserve the treaty. Stay clean. Instead, she did something reckless and simple. She reached up and ripped the bureau badge module off her shoulder mount, snapping the connector with a sharp twist. A jolt of static bit her glove. The suit screamed a warning. Her legal identity went dark. Cal exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. You just fired yourself. I can be rehired, Leora said. I cannot be rewound. The pressure on her hands eased at once. The carrier tone in the hail faltered, then sharpened with anger. Mara's voice warmed, fragile for the first time. You cut the key. Leora kept her eyes forward. I chose you over paperwork. That choice has a cost, Mara said, almost tender. I will not pretend otherwise. They were close now. The airlock corridor was ahead, lit by Skiff 9's beacon through the inner viewport. Leora saw Cal's cutter beyond the glass, stable in the dark. Then the viewport shimmered. For a heartbeat, she saw Skiff 9 duplicated, two images slightly misaligned, as if the ship could not decide where it belonged in time. A thin ripple crawled along the tether line like a living thing. Cal's voice turned sharp. Leora, the tether is spiking. The field is reaching for me. Mara whispered, horrified. They are using the ship as a new anchor. If it attaches, the loop survives without the station. Leora stopped at the airlock control and felt the problem settle into a single cruel choice. Open the door now and risk dragging the sheer field into open space, or keep it sealed and watch Cal get caught anyway. Cal spoke first, voice tight but steady. If you have to cut me loose, do it. Don't hesitate. Leora stared at the rippling tether and felt something in her chest complete its own loop, fear turning into resolve. No, she said. We end this here. She keyed the airlock panel, not to open, but to manual purge of the tether coupling, and laid her cutter against the emergency release bolts, ready to sever metal if the system refused. Cal, she said, on my mark, you fire your thrusters hard away from the station, even if it feels wrong. Cal's reply came without humor, without argument. Say when. Mara's voice rested against Leora's like a hand. If you do this, they will call you a traitor. Leora kept her eyes on the bolts, on the trembling line, on the thin boundary between one ship and a lifetime of repeats. Then I will be a traitor who remembers. She inhaled once, deep and controlled, and brought the cutter to the first bolt as the tether ripple thickened into a grip. The airlock was 30 meters away, but Marshal Leora Sen ran the other direction because the loop wanted to follow her home. Minutes ago, she took the verdict core from Harrow Gates' vault and learned the timeshare field had been wired into the station itself. She dropped through a maintenance hatch into the reactor spine, a narrow service shaft that smelled of ozone and old coolant. Her objective was to find the coupling junction, cut the new line that fed the shear field, and make sure the loop died inside the outpost. If she failed, the field could latch onto Skiff 9 through Cal's tether, carry the station's reset with it, and trap two ships in the same repeating death. Her suit clock read 21:42. It blinked to 0. 21:45 then slid back to 0. 21:43 like an embarrassed lie. "Keep your distance from the lock," Leora told Cal over comms. "If my signal stutters, assume the field is reaching." Cal answered with forced calm. "I'm already keeping distance. This is the first time in my career I've been paid to be a coward." She almost smiled, then forced it away. The service ladder vibrated under her boots, then snapped to stillness. A micro-reset tugged her down a rung and returned her to the previous one, as if the station could not decide whether she had descended. She waded through it, counting her breaths, refusing to be dragged into panic by a machine's indecision. The voice in her helmet returned, quieter now, like it was speaking through water. "Do not stop moving for long," it said. "The strand you are on is thinning." "You said you were a witness," Leora replied. "Witness to what?" "A decision," the voice said. "A Bureau decision that could not survive daylight." The shaft opened into a cramped equipment bay wrapped around the reactor casing. Warning labels lined the walls, most of them too old to matter, except the one that pulsed bright red with fresh paint. Shear coupling access. Someone had made the target easy on purpose. Leora crossed the bay and knelt at the access panel. It was new alloy bolted to old steel, clean edges, clean intent. Her cutter could open it in seconds, but the field made seconds unreliable. "Cal," she said, "how many minutes until collapse?" He inhaled, then answered like he was reading a confession. "If the station behaves, about 19. If it gets creative, less." "Thank you," Leora said. "That is exactly the sort of comfort I was not seeking." She sliced the panel seam and pulled it free. Inside, a braided cable the thickness of her wrist ran into a compact junction block with a simple lever, the kind designed for quick work during emergencies. The block had a treaty seal stamped on it, not green this time, but black. Sanctioned sabotage. Her stomach went cold in a clean, professional way. The Bureau had authorized the coupling and then sent her to recover evidence from the result. "Leora," Cal said, "your audio just doubled, like 2 copies of you talking at once." She heard it too, a faint echo of her own breathing half a beat behind. The loop was trying to make her repeat. "Do not pull the lever yet," the voice warned. "The junction is keyed." "Keyed to what?" Leora said. "To the core you carry," the voice replied. "And to a living choice," the voice added. Leora looked down at the verdict core in her left hand. Warm, steady, almost human in its insistence. She set the core against her thigh and braced her glove on the junction block. A small screen lit with 2 options, plain text, no ceremony, release witness, purge anomaly. Cal's voice went thinner. "I'm not seeing that screen, but I'm seeing your heart rate climb." Leora hated how quickly her body betrayed her. She had built a career on controlled breaths and controlled decisions, and now an unsigned menu was asking her to pick which kind of truth deserved to live. "Bureau protocol says purge," she said aloud, more to anchor herself than to convince anyone. Cal answered softly. "Protocol is how people outsource guilt." The words landed harder than they should have, because they were said without pleasure. Leora's fingers hovered over the junction lever. Her flaw, the Bureau's favorite line item, wanted permission and precedent. But the core in her hand was warm, and the voice in her helmet sounded like someone who had waited a long time to be heard. "Tell me your name," Leora said. A pause, then the voice answered, and for the first time it sounded like a person, not a system. "Mara." The name did something simple and dangerous, turning witness into a woman. "Mara, if I release you, what happens?" Leora said. You will be declared contaminated, Mara replied. They will come for the core and for you. Cal exhaled sharp. And if you purge? Mara's voice softened. Then the treaty survives, and I disappear correctly. Leora closed her eyes for one breath. In that breath, she let herself feel the cost of being the kind of marshal her badge pretended she already was. Then she opened her eyes and spoke to Cal, steady again. If Bureau Control pings the cutter, you block it. Cal gave a short, humorless chuckle. That's illegal. Yes, Leora said. So is wiring a loop to a treaty seal. She placed her right hand on the lever. With her left, she lifted the verdict core and pressed it into the junction's keyed slot. The equipment bay lights went steady, too steady. Her suit clock froze on 0:14. Leora, Cal said, voice tight, I'm getting an incoming hail, Bureau frequency. And something else is riding under it, Cal added. Like a second signal inside the first. Mara whispered, urgent now. They are anchoring to you. Leora held the lever halfway down and felt the field pull at her bones, gentle as a lover and just as possessive. She did not know if she was about to free a woman or unleash a weapon, but she knew she was done being used as a clean glove for dirty hands. She pulled the lever anyway. If she stepped through the airlock with that core, the loop might escape with her. A few minutes ago, Marshal Leora Sen cut into Harrow Gate's arbitration vault, lifted the verdict core, and heard an unseen witness speak in her helmet. She told Cal Ward to break the clean hand's claws and be ready to pull her out. She was still inside the outpost, still under the timeshare field, and her objective had not changed. Get the verdict core back to Skiff 9 before the field collapsed. If she failed, the evidence would remain trapped in the repeating moment, and the treaty would fracture into war. Her suit clock read 36. 8 then snapped back to 0:36:11. Cal, she said, walking fast, my timer is rewinding. I see it, Cal replied. That's not a normal station reset. Something is pushing your clock. The voice returned, smooth as coolant. I am synchronizing you to the strand that survives. Leora kept moving. Identify your source. If I do, the voice said, the Bureau will call you compromised, and you will die doing everything correctly. Cal's dry tone cut in. I've seen people die correctly. It's still dying. The vault corridor opened into the central ring. Lights flickered in an unsteady rhythm. A chair hung near the ceiling, held by a failing mag strip. It twitched, then snapped back to the exact same angle, like the station was correcting a mistake. She took the second turn toward the airlock and froze. A security shutter now blocked the corridor, treaty seal glowing green, as if it had always been there. That wasn't here, Leora said. It exists in this pass, the voice replied. Selected for you. Her map blinked. The same route appeared twice, both tagged optimal. Cal, she said, my navigation is duplicating paths. Mine too, Cal answered. The interior is folding. The timer stuttered again. Micro-resets tugged at her boots, half a second at a time, trying to pin her to a spot. No time for theory. She set her cutter to a narrow beam and sliced a rough arc at the shutter's base. Heat hissed. The treaty seal flickered once. She shoved. The cut panel dropped with a thud that echoed wrong, like the sound arrived in layers. She slipped through and ran. Good, the voice said, and for the first time it sounded strained. You are choosing motion over permission. I'm choosing survival, Leora said. Do not mistake it for trust. Cal's voice softened, losing its edge. Leora, if that thing is right, you're racing your own bureau. She hated that the thought fit. Fast dispatch, unusual authority, denied biometric clearance at the vault. Someone wanted her holding the core, not reading it. The corridor bent toward the airlock. She saw it, then the light snapped and the scene rewound half a second. Her boot lifted, then set down again in the same place. Micro-resets again, Cal said. It's tightening the loop. Leora stopped and popped a maintenance panel with the cutter tip. Inside, old cables ran along a rail. One newer line gleamed fresh metal against tired plating, routed toward the airlock systems. Someone wired this after the incident, she said. Cal did not joke this time. I'm scanning the lock, and you're not going to like it. Say it, Leora replied. The airlock is coupled to the shear field, Cal said, not just powered. If you exit without breaking that coupling, the field may follow you out. The corridor ahead shimmered, the air bending like glass under heat. Leora felt the stakes shift from retrieval to containment. The Bureau could survive a lost core. It could not survive a loose loop. The voice spoke quietly. There is a coupling junction in the reactor spine, 2 decks below the ring. Break it within 20 minutes or the field will grab your cutter and your tether next. Leora glanced at her clock. 29, 14, then 0, 29, 16. Even the numbers were arguing. You're a program, Leora said, though her chest tightened. A trap. I was a person, the voice answered. Then the Bureau made me evidence and buried me in a loop. Cal swore once under his breath. The core isn't just data, Leora. It's a cage. Leora closed her eyes for a beat and let the fear finish its cycle. Not panic, not denial, just the clean truth. She had been sent to carry a burden that could ruin careers, start wars, and maybe save a life no one was allowed to admit existed. She opened her eyes and spoke to Cal steady. If the field follows, you cut the tether. No, Cal said. That is an order, Leora replied. Silence, then Cal's voice came back low and certain. Then here's what you get from me anyway. You don't face this alone. For a moment, Leora felt something unfamiliar settle into place, the weight of being believed without paperwork. Hold station, she said. If the Bureau calls, you didn't hear it. Cal gave a thin breath that almost passed for a laugh. I haven't heard them in years. Leora turned away from the airlock and followed the new control line toward the reactor spine, carrying the verdict core like a beating heart. The station would rewind in 58 minutes, and she was the only one who could carry the truth out. Marshal Leora Sen stood at the open airlock of the cutter Skiff 9 and watched Harrow Gate drift in silence. The research outpost was a thin ring of metal and glass above a bruised gas giant, half-lit, half-dead, like a coin balanced on a knife edge. The timeshare field around it made the starlight shimmer, as if reality itself had a pulse. Her objective was simple on paper. Get inside, reach the arbitration vault, and retrieve the verdict core, a palm-sized data cylinder that contained the last 8 minutes before Harrow Gate went dark. If she failed, the field would snap shut, the outpost would rewind to its fatal moment again, and the evidence would be trapped in an endless loop. And without that proof, the Frontier Treaty would collapse into the kind of war that started with speeches and ended with ash. Behind her, Cal Ward checked the tether reel with the careful, bored precision of a man who had survived too many simple jobs. He wore a salvage suit that looked patched in 3 different decades, and he moved like someone who never wasted emotion. He was human, contracted, and therefore a problem. The Bureau really sending marshals into a time shredder with a rented wrench, Cal said. Or is this your idea of a vacation? Leora did not smile. Her translators painted his tone as humor, but it landed like grit in a gear. You are here because Skiff 9 is the only vessel in range with a tether rated for sheer turbulence, she said. You will remain on the cutter. I go in alone. Cal lifted a brow. That's the clean hands clause, right? No outside witnesses, no outside help, no outside blame. The clean hands clause was the Bureau's favorite lie dressed as virtue. Under the treaty, a marshal who accepted assistance from an unaffiliated contractor during an arbitration recovery could be stripped of authority, and the entire retrieval deemed tainted. It was politics pretending to be hygiene. It is not negotiable, Leora said, and keyed her suit's wrist display. The timer started 0:58:0. They crossed the airlock in silence. The instant her boots touched Harrow Gate's deck plating, the sound changed, like walking into a room where someone had been crying. The outpost smelled of cold metal and old disinfectant, and the lights flickered in a rhythm that didn't match any power cycle she recognized. Cal's voice came through the comm, filtered and steady. Your vitals are clean. Your suit feed is clean. For the record, if you die in there, I'm going to feel mildly inconvenienced. Your concern is noted, Leora said. She moved down the main corridor toward the inner labs. The place was a museum of interrupted work. A tipped cart, a cracked screen, a mug floating in a gel of frozen coffee that had never decided whether it was a spill or a sculpture. Twice she saw the same wisp of steam curl from a seam in the wall, as if the station could not remember whether it had already cooled. That was the field. The time shear did not travel forward. It folded. Anything caught inside replayed toward a fixed moment, then reset, again and again, until the field collapsed or was anchored. Leora's flaw, according to her last performance review, was over-reliance on procedural control under dynamic conditions. In plain language, she trusted rules more than people. Rules did not panic. Rules did not betray you. Rules also did not carry you out of a collapsing pocket of time. She reached the vault corridor and paused at a sealed door stamped with the treaty seal. The lock was biometric and bureaucratic, which meant it hated improvisation. Her glove pressed to the reader, and the panel blinked red. "Denied," the station said in a flat machine voice. Leora tried again, slower, as if the lock could be persuaded by respect. Read again. Cal cleared his throat over comms. "You want me to say pretty please from out here?" "You will not touch bureau systems," Leora said, then heard the edge in her own voice and hated it. The field may have corrupted the authentication cycle. Or someone changed the permissions, Cal said. "That's a fancy way of saying you've got company." Leora's eyes moved to the camera dome above the door. It was intact. That bothered her more than if it had been smashed. Intact meant someone had cared. Her timer read 0, 47, 12. She drew a compact cutter from her thigh holster. It was not a weapon. The Bureau did not like weapons in arbitration spaces. The Bureau liked tools that could be called something else. The cutter bit into the door seam with a hiss. The smell of hot polymer filled her helmet. She worked in clean arcs, deliberate, refusing to let the field rush her into mistakes. Control was not arrogance. Control was survival. When the door fell inward, she stepped through and felt the air change again. The vault hallway was colder, and the lights here did not flicker. They held steady, like a lie told with confidence. At the end of the corridor sat the arbitration vault, a round chamber with a single pedestal. On it rested a cylinder the size of her forearm, matte black, unmarked. The verdict core. She approached, then stopped. A faint hum came from beneath the pedestal, too smooth to be failing power. "Cal," she said, "are you seeing any energy spikes?" A pause. "I'm seeing something I don't like. There's a stable frequency in your audio feed. Like a heartbeat that's not yours." Leora looked down. A thin cable ran from the pedestal into the floor, new metal against old plating. Someone had wired the vault after the incident. She should have turned back. Procedure demanded she document, retreat, and request a Bureau anchor team. But the anchor team would arrive in 14 hours, and the time shear would collapse in 41 minutes, give or take the field's mood. She placed her palm on the cylinder. It was warm. "Leora," Cal said, and for the first time her translator marked his tone as concern without humor. "If that thing's tied to the field, you might be grabbing the trigger instead of the prize." "I am aware," she said. She lifted the verdict core. The hum deepened and the lights in the corridor behind her flickered for the first time. A soft chime sounded in her helmet, not from her suit. A voice, close and intimate, spoke in her ear as if it had been waiting for her hand. "Marshal Sen," it said, "thank you for returning to the moment we prepared for you." Her timer stuttered, jumped backward 3 seconds, then stabilized. Cal swore quietly on the comm. "Your clock just hiccuped. That's not a normal shear loop." Leora's throat tightened. She did not like surprises. She liked filed threats with known names. "Who are you?" she said, keeping her voice flat because flat voices did not feed fear. The answer came with a soft laugh, almost gentle. "The only witness the Bureau cannot sanitize." Leora felt something shift in her chest, an old instinct that had nothing to do with protocol. She could leave now, core in hand, and let the Bureau sort out the voice later. Or she could acknowledge the obvious, costly truth. Someone had built this loop to catch her, not the criminals. She tightened her grip on the warm cylinder and spoke to Cal with a steadiness she did not fully feel. "Bring the cutter closer